from here, I'd like to turn it over to the corporate side to give some general market commentary.
Thanks, Zach. Urology is another specialty that is in high demand from the private equity community, although, if you're sort of following closely, you might not see as much transaction activity as you would expect. Our feeling is that the reason for that is, you saw 6 or 7 platforms get out in front of the wave of consolidation, and they were able to establish themselves as buyers in the market at premium valuations. Frankly, right, supply and demand was a large driver there, and you've seen those groups continue to be active from what I'll call an add-on standpoint. What I think is interesting about urology is that we would have expected more platforms in the specialty, and we know that there are a number of sponsors looking to establish a platform in urology, right? It's a super ancillary rich specialty. Reimbursement has been very stable. The doctors make a lot of money, so the scrape can allow you to create significant EBITDA, right? We talked about yield per physician and other specialties earlier on. Urology is a specialty that is that way, right? In part because there are so many available ancillaries, as well as opportunities in surgery centers and radiation oncology and things of that nature. The reality is, I think this is a supply problem. It's a different supply problem than cardiology, which is more of a, there aren't that many independent cardiologists out there. In urology, those big sizable groups, I think, frankly, are just content. And they are, they're enjoying their lives. They're happy. They're doing what they want to be doing. They're running their practices. They are, savvy business folks, which has allowed them to invest in those ancillaries and grow their businesses and use that money to fund, physician guarantees and adding providers to their quote unquote platforms. And I think, as time goes on, it's really a matter of education, right? We'll see private equity continue to crack that nut slowly but surely. But it's proven to be slower on the come than perhaps we would have expected earlier on. I don't know, Kevin, is that sort of how consistent with what you're seeing in the urology market?
Yeah, John, I think you bring up an interesting point too, because clearly you saw kind of a big wave of some of these larger groups being formed, and a lot of that was starting in maybe 2019 into 2020 and 2021. And a lot of those were like the Solaris of the world, United Urology Group, US Urology Partners. A lot of your big name PE firms, started their platforms and have grown those platforms. But the number of platforms is really, is small. It's more kind of akin to your cardiology, despite the fact that, as you mentioned, you've got the number of available physicians out there is quite large. And you've got, generally what we've seen is urologists they tend to congregate in larger groups to begin with. And so you've got these large groups that presumably, if you're just thinking about it from a consolidation standpoint, the accessibility and availability of large physician groups make it kind of ripe, you'd think, for these roll-ups. There are, and it certainly is, very, very much ancillary rich, starting with like the labs and pathology, into lithotripsy, is a kind of a unique ancillary as well, that nearly all these groups have a significant stake in, and drive significant profit overall. That's the hard part. And one of the, that ambulatory surgery centers, radiation oncology, if we think about why hasn't there been as much activity, perhaps it lies in some of those ancillaries and some of those ancillaries potentially being tied up in non-competes. Clearly, they derive significant income from those ancillaries. The groups drive significant income from those ancillaries, however, don't have perfect visibility into some of those structures as far as non-competes and the ability of third-party buyers and investors to tap into those sources. Now, I would think something like, litho and maybe to a lesser extent radiation oncology and ambulatory surgery But that income would come in through the practice base, which would allow potential monetization of that ancillary income stream in a platform transaction. But again, that I think maybe is just a little bit of the unique nature of urology specifically, and why we haven't seen as many deals as we have in certain other specialties for an industry that seems to be pretty ripe for it.
So chiming in on the real estate angle for the urology specialty, some of the same themes that we talked about previously with orthopedic and cardiology apply, although generally speaking, the building requirements are slightly less costly for urology clinics. That said, some of the full service clinics that may offer therapeutic radiation oncology, and they're going to have linear accelerators and vaults, are going to have very high building costs, and the same question of operational viability informing real estate risk and value is going to apply. There have been quite a few transactions that I'm sure Clint could provide examples of, sale leasebacks in the sector. And in my home state of Colorado, years back, the Urology Center of Colorado sold in a large, single site deal. They were a comprehensive single center that sold for I don't recall, 600 something a foot, and is an example of even 6 years ago the high cost and high value associated with one of these comprehensive urology centers that's offering a full array of services. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Clint.
Victor, thank you very much. And first off, at BGL, we've been very fortunate to be hired on the consultative side for monetizing a number of very large urology practices, real estate aspect of the practice. So that has been tremendous to work with those various practices. One of the key things, obviously, is the folks on the panel have alluded to previously, is the really congregation of urologists within a practice. You see, vast number of market share be associated with a dominant practice in a municipality. And additionally, when you look at urology residents, right, we've got 390 to 400 residents that are coming out per annum and are effectively the supply for the future of these urology practices. And it's a very competitive market to obtain these residents within the fold of the practice. Victor made an excellent point in the practices that are taking on these groups or these residents are those that have put in the work and the equity and developed cancer therapy centers, ambulatory surgical settings, very high level of clinical background in real estate. So, the rich have kind of become richer in the world of urology, and we would see that to be the bearing point on the horizon. But as a specialization and focus, very, very strong market indicators for the practice of urology.